Good afternoon. The National Assembly of Wales is now in session, and the first item this afternoon questions the First Minister. And question 1 is Kirsty Williams.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. Will the First Minister make a statement on educational standards in Brecon and Radnorshire?
Well, education standards in the area, in common with standards in Wales as a whole, present an improving picture, and this includes at national and local level an improvement in the Key Stage 4 Level 2 inclusive results.
Can I thank the First Minister for that answer? First Minister, on many occasions you've said in this chamber that that schools that are providing a good standard of education should not be closed. And as you've just said yourself, there are improvements in standards of education in Brecon and Radnorshire. Therefore, will you agree with me that Powys County Council's ill-conceived plans to close a number of small rural primary schools and amalgamate and potentially close some of our high schools will do nothing to improve the educational attainment levels of people in Brecon and Radnorshire? I know many of my constituents have already written to you on this subject and are looking to the Welsh Government to intervene if possible. What can you say to those parents who have written to you concerned that rather than improving educational outcomes in Brecon and Radnor, the plans by the Council will actually make things worse?
As the member knows, these are matters for the local authority. Nevertheless, as she also knows, Welsh ministers have a role in certain statutory circumstances, and therefore I can't comment on any plans that may be referred to Welsh ministers. But I know that she, over many weeks in this chamber, has expressed the concerns of her constituents. I've expressed the view many times that I hope that the LEA would take those concerns into account. If the matter now, of course, is referred to Welsh ministers, then these are issues which will be taken into account by the relevant minister.
Mick Anthony of Brecon and Radnorshire.
Yes, First Minister, the quality of standards, quality of educational standards in Brecon and Radnorshire are obviously dependent on the amount of educational funding that's available. First Minister, on the 17th of November 2010, the leader of the Welsh Conservatives, when asked how much they would cut the education budget by, said, and I quote, "It's about 20%. In the light of the refusal of the current leader of the Welsh Conservatives to commit to protecting the education budget, we can only assume they will cut education by 20% if they were to ever be in power. First Minister, what would be the implications for education in Wales if the Tories were ever to be elected to power?
There were to be a 20% cut in education funding in Brecon and Radnorshire. That would have an enormously detrimental effect, as it would elsewhere in Wales, including the constituencies that we represent. It would mean, for instance, across Wales, potentially 5,000 fewer teachers. It would certainly mean fewer resources for schools, and it would certainly mean that schools would not be built in the future. And we had confirmation of this over the weekend when the leader of the opposition said that he would not protect education spending.
William Powell.
Diolch, Llywydd. And in accordance with the Members' Register of Interest, I should declare that I'm both a member of Powys County Council, but also a governor, and indeed, back in the day, former head boy of one of the schools that's threatened with closure. First Minister. Oh, absolutely. First Minister, I'm acutely aware of the current concern in Brecon and Radnorshire around the school reorganisation proposals. One particular issue that's widely raised by concerned members of the community is the perceived remoteness of cabinet decision-making, and this is also mirrored elsewhere in my region in Pembrokeshire with current issues that are coming forward. First Minister, would you agree with me that it would serve greatly the cause of transparency if the leaders of local authorities faced with such decisions were to desist from the practice of holding informal, unminuted cabinet meetings ahead of formal business sessions, so as to give communities affected greater confidence at the transparency of the decisions that are arrived at?
I think transparency is absolutely crucial. It's important that where people see decisions being made, even if they disagree with those decisions, that they understand how those decisions came about and the reasoning behind those decisions. I'm not aware of what process was followed in Powys on this occasion, but clearly I'm aware, as the members pointed out, and indeed the leader of the Liberal Democrats, that this is a particularly controversial issue in Brecon and Radnor.
Question 2, Julie Morgan.
What plans does the Welsh Government have to improve mental health services in South Wales?
Well, one of the government's priorities is to improve the mental health and well-being of people right across Wales. and services have been improved through increased funding within the ring fence every year throughout this Assembly term, with over £15 million of additional funding this year.
I thank the First Minister for that response. I'm sure the First Minister is aware that Whitchurch Hospital is closing its doors at the end of this month after 108 years providing mental health services for Cardiff and the surrounding area. So it really is the end of an era. Does the First Minister agree that the new mental health services, the building provided at Landock Hospital, are absolutely outstanding? But will he also acknowledge the good work that has been done in Whitchurch by the staff over many years for people with mental health problems?
I'm more than happy to join the member in the praise that she has for the staff, both present and past. Whitchurch has served the City of Cardiff since 1908. But it's time, of course, to ensure that the facilities that we provide for people with mental health problems are state-of-the-art. That's why, of course, we see the investment in Havant-y-Coed at Llandoch. It's an £88 million investment. Of course, it is a facility that will provide the best level of care possible for those who require assistance with their mental health.
Angela Burns.
Thank you very much, Presiding Officer. Minister, mental health services obviously need to evolve as practice and knowledge changes. However, I am concerned that vulnerable people are being caught between understaffed resources and policy changes. Whether it's people with severe and enduring mental health services, like two of my constituents, one of who has to go to a hospital to be in a hospital 200 miles away from that person's home and another 150 miles away, or whether it's people like the Avenue Centre users in Tenby who have severe mental and physical disabilities. The concern that is echoed to me by health professionals or mental health professionals and the families of people, of these kind of people, is that they don't believe the services are being holistic enough, and it would appear that people are being bent to fit the new policies that come through and the new acts, rather than those policies being adapted to suit their particular vulnerable requirements. First Minister, what can your government do to ensure that there's speedy and effective changes to ensure that some of these more vulnerable people really do have tailored packages that best suit them and their families?
Well, we, of course, have increased the budget for mental health services. The total spend this year is £600 million, up from £510 million in 2010 to 11. And, of course, the member will be aware of an additional £7.65 million a year to improve and develop specialist child and adolescent mental health services. That's a 17% increase in CAMHS spread across primary and secondary care. We've also announced a further £30 million of additional funding for older people. That is a substantial injection of resources, and we would of course expect the service to wrap around the individual rather, as she has pointed out, for the individual to be made to fit the service. That is not the sort of service that we would see LHBs providing. We expect the service to be tailored as far as possible to the individual.
Elena Parrott.
Diolch, Llywydd. First Minister, I was grateful for the Health Minister's measured response to the mental health debate held last week. However, there was no specific commitment to improving support services and advice and information for families. I wonder, given how important it is, would you look at making that commitment to look at best practice across the UK and assess the support that is available for people who are either caring for someone with mental ill health or they're concerned about someone in their family who is showing signs of mental distress, but they don't know where to go to for help or support?
Well, this is one of the reasons, of course, why we've substantially increased the funding for CAMHS, because we know that CAMHS has been a service where there's been a great deal of demand, and we know that for many parents, where they have quite often adolescent children who are displaying signs that are difficult for parents to control, that CAMHS is the place that they will get referred to. And in terms of the money we've provided for CAMHS, that money will, for example, 2.7 million of it will go to improving CAMHS's ability to respond out of hours and at times of crisis. And what is absolutely crucial is that where, perhaps late in the evening, there is an issue that a carer or a parent can't deal with, that support is available at a time that's needed for the individual, the child or young person, and also for the carer or parent. And in that way, of course, the support for families, both within hours and out of hours, is improved.
We now move to questions to the party leaders, and first this afternoon, the Leader of the Opposition, Andrew Archie-Davies.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. First Minister, last week I asked you about the M4 Relief Road, and you said that yes, it was a commitment of yours to build the M4 Relief Road. Last week we also had a report that came out that clearly indicated there had been a considerable uplift in the cost of building such a road, especially the black route, which was identified as this government's preferred option. Can you explain why your initial comments before Christmas indicated that you said it would be built for considerably less than £1 billion, and now a government report is indicating that the actual build cost is £1.1 billion?
There's a £147 million contingency within that figure, which we intend to squeeze, of course, as far as possible. There has been a change at the eastern end of the proposal where an enhanced junction at the M48 is going to be remodelled. That has increased the cost by £60 million, but that's been as a result of public requests for better connectivity. There's also the inclusion of an additional cycle bridge over the proposed motorway to the west of Newport to facilitate the Newport to Cardiff super cycleway, as well as work on the Dyffryn Rail Tunnel. So these are issues that have arisen during the course of the scheme. Now, from our perspective, we wish to see an M4 relief road being built. It's true to say our preferred route is the black route, but of course we are willing to examine other options should they prove feasible. Though thus far it's been difficult to see how they can be as effective as the black route, but there is a statutory process that will need to be followed here. But what is absolutely true is the problem will not go away. It's a major problem. When we look at hosting large events at the Millennium Stadium, it is an issue that is raised with us, and he and I think, are in the same position of wanting to see a relief road being built.
Thank you for that answer, First Minister. I mean, many people will be concerned by the considerable extent of the numbers that are being talked about and the sudden £300 million difference between obviously figures that had been bandied around by yourself and now this report confirming a £1.1 billion price tag to this delivery. But one thing is clear, and I agree entirely with you, the situation around Newport cannot continue, and there is a desperate need for an M4 relief road. Do you agree with me that it will be incumbent on whichever government is formed here after May the 5th to have as an integral part of its transport strategy the delivery of the M4 relief road within its term of office here in the 5th Assembly?
No, I agree with that. It is by far the most difficult traffic problem that we have on our roads. It isn't going to improve. There is a resilience issue with the tunnels as well. I know there are those who advocate the blue route. The difficulty with the blue route to me is that it's a dual carriageway, not a three-lane motorway. Excuse me. And secondly, it affects about 4,000 houses because it passes very close to so many houses, and some would have to be demolished. There is no easy way to resolve the problem. There is no cheap way to resolve the problem, but we do know the problem needs to be resolved.
Thank you for that answer, First Minister. Presiding Officer, with your indulgence, as this is the last First Minister's questions that myself and the First Minister will engage with before the election, I'd just like to pay tribute to the retiring members who are standing down from the Assembly, from all the parties here. Whilst we might have the political theatre within this chamber, I'm sure that you will agree with me, First Minister, that everyone does go into public life with the best intentions, whatever political affiliation they have, and through their own ways and means they do try and endeavour to deliver for their constituents and indeed the best interest of Wales in this institution. And I hope you will be able to join me in paying tribute to my colleague William Graham, who for 17 years has served so diligently this institution with integrity, pride and passion, and ultimately has served his constituents so well. But above all, I hope you will agree with me that whatever happens in the election over the next 6 to 7 weeks, the Assembly that will convene here for the 5th Assembly, people do go into public life for the best reasons, and that is to shape and help create a better environment, a better community and a better Wales within the United Kingdom.
Well, nobody could disagree with what the Leader of the Opposition has said. William Graham was one of the original 99 group, as I was, and personally, he is somebody who I will miss in this chamber, and I'm sure I speak for many in that, if not all, in that regard. I was thinking only yesterday that I've probably gone through more than 200 First Minister's question sessions with about 2,000 questions, which I'll use the phrase dealt with. Others can judge as to whether they were answered or not. But certainly, it is the case that when somebody stands in my position, then it is hugely important to be tested, sometimes uncomfortably, on the issues of the day. And that comes back to the point that this may be theatre. He and I know that this is an element of theatre, but it has a serious element, and that is to test forensically what government does.
We now move to Leader of Plaid Cymru, Liam Wood.
Diolch Llywydd, and I'd like to echo the comments of the leader of the Conservatives in wishing all the retiring members well, and especially the 3 retiring members of my group, Alan Fred Jones, Jocelyn Davies and Roderick Glyn Thomas. But I do wish all of you well. First Minister, when you were elected as Labour leader 7 years ago, you said, and I quote, "I want to be the leader for the whole of Wales. To win back Wales, Welsh Labour has to listen and it has to learn." What has been the biggest lesson that you've learned in 7 years as First Minister?
Oh, the lesson you soon learn as a minister is that things can't be done as quickly as you would want on occasion. And she asks, I wondered whether this question would come. And my answer is that, for example, back in 2011, it took longer than we would have expected to start the legislative programme. It was a bigger undertaking, I think, than was realised at the time. Since then, of course, those issues have been resolved, and the Assembly has certainly risen to the task of producing sound legislation that's been well scrutinised, and 24 acts in that time. That's a significant achievement in a very short space of time. But yeah, I mean, I think it was difficult at the beginning in 2011 to actually get the legislative programme up and running as quickly as we'd have wanted.
Okay, so you haven't learned any lessons about growing NHS waiting lists or deteriorating international standing in terms of education or economic stagnation. First Minister, among the many comments and feedback that I get from people regarding these sessions is that you are regularly evasive, that you avoid...
Order.
That you avoid answering the questions and that you rarely engage. Now, given that this is the final question session of the term, do you regret not being more engaging in these sessions? And do you regret not showing real leadership for this country?
Well, I mean, the leader of Plaid Cymru makes it sound as if I sit here sphinx-like and say nothing in the course of First Minister's questions. She may not like my answers, but she gets answers. The issues that she raised, I don't agree with. We see waiting lists coming down, diagnostic waiting lists, test waiting lists coming down in health. We see our best GCSE results ever, excellent results at A-level, foundation phase doing well. New schools being built all across Wales, 150 schools either being built or planned to be built. We see in further education, the education maintenance allowance has been maintained. We see our students are not subject to £22,000 of extra debt as their cohort is in England. Economic stagnation, our unemployment is lower than London, it's lower than Scotland, and lower than Northern Ireland. That is a significant achievement. We've been hugely successful in bringing jobs into Wales. Aston Martin was one example, General Dynamics last week another example, and there are more to come over the course of the next few weeks. We have never been in such a strong position in terms of bringing investment into Wales. The only thing, and she will agree, I'm sure, with this point, the only thing that can jeopardise that is the uncertainty over EU membership.
First Minister, you don't accept that there are any problems in this country that you are responsible for at all, do you? On the day that you were elected leader, you said that you wanted to listen and that you wanted to learn. Now, 6 years after you became leader, you launched an engagement exercise, a series of public meetings throughout the country, presumably to listen to people and to learn. Now, I wonder, does that mean that you spent the first 6 years neither listening to people nor learning? As the sun sets on your government and the Fourth Assembly, are you now prepared to show some humility and admit that this isn't as good as it gets for our country? And will you now accept that now is the time for Wales to have a First Minister who will answer questions, who will engage and who will treat these scrutiny sessions and the Welsh public with the respect that they deserve?
Well, I mean, I'll let other people judge the contrast between the Leader of the Opposition and the Leader of Plaid Cymru. But she makes the point, it's the last FMQ, there's an election coming, that she wishes to be seen as an alternative First Minister. Well, I mean, the points that I make are these. I don't believe the answer to the challenges in the health service is a giant health quango based in Cardiff. I don't think that's going to go down well in the west and the north of Wales. A quango, in fact, that would be so big, it would be almost as big as the government itself, and have a budget almost as large as the government itself. I think that's an abdication of responsibility. There'd be no point having a health minister if you have a quango that big. The answer to economic development, despite the great success we've been having, is to reintroduce the WDA, to go back to the days long ago, to some imagined nirvana when the WDA was doing better. I mean, it seems to me that Plaid Cymru's proposals usually involve setting up a giant committee of some kind. We saw the same with the National Innovation Body. That is an evasion of responsibility. You cannot set up, to my mind, you cannot give away economic development and health and expect to be held accountable as a government. We've had the greatest success we've had for 30 years in the field of economic development. That's because the team we have in place is superb. We were successful in getting Aston Martin because, and I'll quote what they said, because of our passion and professionalism. We cannot unpick that and set up an agency that would cause even more disruption, that would take the attention away from job creation and attracting investment. And I do not believe, for example, in Ceredigion or in Gwynedd, that the idea of a health quango based in Cardiff goes down particularly well.
And we now move to the Leader of the Welsh Liberal Democrats, Kirsty Williams.
Thank you very much, Presiding Officer. Could I begin by thanking you, Presiding Officer, for the decades of public service that you have given to our country, especially in your current role as the Presiding Officer over this Assembly term. And I wish you well in your future endeavours. And could I extend those good wishes to all Assembly members that are retiring at the end of this session, especially to the class of 99 and colleagues who embarked upon the devolution journey alongside myself at that time. Can I wish them well in their future endeavours too? First Minister, could I thank you for the personal kindness in which you have always shown me. You said that you have dealt with 2,000 FMQs. Back in the old days, I was allowed to ask more than 3. I don't know about dealing with 2,000. You've given precious few answers in that time, but I have greatly enjoyed the encounters across the chamber mostly. So if I can turn to my set of questions today. Now, at the last election, you did promise to make surgeries more accessible to working people so that they could access local GP services in the evenings and Saturday mornings. Now, the result of a survey that I've carried out amongst GPs say 77% of them say that your policy has failed to improve opening hours. It hasn't worked. And your own survey by your own government demonstrated that 40% of people still say it's very difficult to get a GP appointment. Given that was your #1 health commitment, why do you feel that GPs feel that you haven't achieved it?
Well, I mean, the Leader of the Liberal Democrats will forgive me for being sceptical about Lib Dem surveys. There are many of us in this chamber who have the experience of seeing leaflets that show that the Liberal Democrats are about to take our own seats, or indeed council seats. And she will know we've had some sport over that issue over the years in this chamber. Without having seen the survey, or indeed understood how many people responded to it, then clearly I can't comment on it. But bear in mind my scepticism from the beginning. Now, in terms of access to GP appointments, as I said, 82% of GP practices are open for daily core hours, in other words, 8 a.m. to 6:30 p.m. Monday to Friday. 97% of practices are offering appointments at any time between 5 p.m. and 6:30 p.m. on at least 2 weekdays. That's up from 92% in 2011. 79% of practices offered appointments at any time between 5 p.m. and 6:30 p.m. every day, up from 62% in 2011. And the percentage of practices closed half day on one weekday has fallen from 19% in 2011 to 4% in 2015. Now, of course, because GPs tend to be independent contractors, then then we are reliant on them ensuring that they're able to provide the service that they should. But nevertheless, what we have seen is an enormous improvement in GP accessibility in most surgeries in Wales.
Presiding officer, I am stung by the First Minister's assumption and assertions that you cannot trust a Liberal Democrat survey. Absolutely stung. Bar charts may be, First Minister, but never a survey. Now, the reality is, First Minister, there are indeed, those appointments are available. Of course they are. But the number of people who want to use those appointments far outstrip the number of appointments that are currently available. And that's why 40% of people responding to your government survey say they find it difficult to make an appointment. But just before the last election, you also said that when the next PISA International Education Rankings were published, Wales would be further up the list. Now, when they were published, what it did show that Wales was performing worst in the UK for reading and in maths and in science, and subsequently you've given up breaking into the top 20 of international nations altogether. Why do you feel you weren't able to meet your pledge with regards to education in Wales that you made at the beginning of this term of office?
PISA is the one area where we need to crack in order to see improvement. Everything else is moving in the right direction. Why do I say that? Well, we pledged in 2011 that we would apply a level of protection to school spending. We've done that. £106 million extra is available within the Welsh education system than would otherwise have been the case. Together with her party, of course, we introduced the Pupil Deprivation Grant. That's been successful. Schools Challenge Cymru has helped to raise the standards of those schools who are not performing as we would expect them to. And we're seeing results improve across the board, which gives us reason to suspect that the PISA results will improve in the future. We're seeing it with GCSEs, we're seeing it with A-levels, and importantly, we're seeing schools being built across Wales. Most recently, I was opening the new community school in Aberdare, and cutting the first sod on the new campus of Coleg y Cymoedd in Aberdare as well. That's a sign of a government investing in our young people.
First Minister, earlier this year you claimed that you needed 5 more years to complete a decade of delivery. Yet, despite your bluster in answer to the leader of Plaid Cymru, for all but 2 quarters of this Assembly, unemployment in Wales has been higher than in England, Scotland and the UK as a whole. We have the least productive economy in the UK and the highest levels of child poverty outside of London. Now, if this level of delivery is what we can expect for the next 5 years of a Labour government, what hope can there be for those people who haven't got a job and whose children are living in poverty, many of whom do actually have parents in full-time employment, but on wages that cannot sustain that family?
Well, there are issues there, of course, for the UK government in terms of working families tax credit, which we don't control. There are issues with regard to other benefits, which we don't control, and we've deplored what the UK government has done in attacking those who are the lowest paid. They didn't cause the financial crisis on the 9th of August 2007. It was reckless lending by those in the banking sector, and yet those are allowed to get away scot-free, and those who are paid the least are the ones being punished the most. She will agree with me, I'm sure, on this. We have deplored what has been done there. But we have brought investment into Wales, and these are not jobs, as in the 90s, that were brought into Wales because people here were on low wages. That's what happened in the 90s. Come to Wales because people will accept less pay than anywhere else. These are jobs that are high-quality jobs. They're skilled jobs. We want to make sure that our people have those skills. We've done it through Jobs Growth Wales. And after May, as she will know, my party has pledged to ensure that apprenticeships are available to all ages. That's the way to ensure the skills pipeline is there. And, of course, we have pledged to ensure that there are 30 hours of free childcare available for 3 to 4-year-olds, for working parents for 48 weeks a year. That's a substantial assistance to many, many working parents with young children to enable them to get to work. And that, of course, is the most important way of reducing poverty, removing hurdles for people who wish to get to work, and then ensure, of course, that they're able to get to work and raise their own incomes and those of their families.
We now move back to questions on the paper, and question 3 is Nick Ramsey.
Will the First Minister outline the performance of his delivery unit over the 4th Assembly term?
Well, the performance and effectiveness of the delivery unit should be judged on the delivery of the programme for government, which is almost complete in terms of delivery.
Thank you. Presiding Officer, can I also offer you my good wishes for the future? Your advice and guidance has always been much appreciated by myself and I know other members in this chamber. First Minister, it's always interesting to hear a little bit more on the workings of the delivery unit. Not quite as shadowy as Spectre, I admit, but sometimes it seems to be getting there. Andrew R.T. Davis has asked you about the ballooning costs of the M4 Black route today. At what point during the development of that road did the delivery unit tell you that the chosen route would cost in excess of £1 billion? Because extra junctions and bridges aside, it's not been that long since you told this chamber the cost would be significantly lower than the £1 billion plus, which it now appears to be.
Well, no, because as I mentioned earlier on, there are elements of the scheme that have that are new, particularly regarding the cycle superhighway, important because it complies with the Active Travel Act, and of course the contingency that is built in. It would be remiss of me not to offer my thanks to the presiding officer as well. I'm aware that I haven't done that as yet. Could I offer those thanks now? I know that the chamber has sometimes been unruly, and I know that the presiding officer has not always had, she's pointing at me, has not always had the easiest task, but that is the nature, I suppose, of a robust democracy. I have to say to the member, he has to decide whether he's in favour of the relief road or not, because in this chamber in the past he's given an indication that he is sceptical about the need for a relief road at all. He can make that case, of course, between now and May.
Christine Chapman.
Thank you. First Minister, it's clear that delivering for the people of Wales has been a key theme for your government during this Assembly term, and it was good to see you break the ground for the new Aberdare campus for Coleg Cymoedd the other week. Do you agree that this £22 million investment will deliver improved access to further education for the people of Cynon Valley, but also make a contribution to helping them realise their potential, which is invaluable not just for them as individuals, but for Wales as a whole?
Absolutely. Coleg Cymoedd has been allocated £11 million of Welsh Government funding towards the scheme. It will provide state-of-the-art facilities for 811 full-time and 450 part-time students, replacing, of course, the existing buildings, which are well past their sell-by date. And, of course, it's very close to public transport hubs, the railway station particularly, which will make it very easy for students to travel to the campus in order to learn there. So, yes, another example of the Welsh Government investing in the future of our youngsters.
Roger Glyn Thomas.
Mae yr uned cyflenwi yn un o ddirgelion mawr y cynulliad yma, prif weinidog, ac mae'n dristwch mawr i fi o'r fod gadael y sefydliad yma ar ôl 2015 heb fyth ddeall beth yn union mae'r uniad cyflenwi yma yn ei gyflawni. Tybed, mewn ysbryd da gan bod chi yn amlwg mewn ysbryd felly ar ddiwedd y tymor yma, a fyddwch chi'n rhoi ateb tryloiw a cwbl agored i mi, be'n union mae'r unwed cyflawni yma yn ei wneud?
Gweithredu'r raglen llywodraethol. Ac bod hwnna'n cael ei ymddangos trwy tystiolaeth sy'n yna, lle ni wedi cyflawni ar bron popeth sydd yn y raglen hynny. So felly mae'r uned wedi wneud y gwaith y dilyn.
Question 4, Sandy Mouise.
Presiding Officer. First Minister, how is the Welsh Government supporting apprenticeships as a key element in tackling youth unemployment?
Well, we recently announced an additional £5 million for apprenticeships next year. We have, of course, focused on growing apprenticeship numbers for 16 to 18-year-olds, raising the number of school leavers going on to apprenticeships, and, of course, we have plans post-May, if we're given the opportunity, to ensure that we create more apprenticeships for people of all ages.
Apprenticeship Week is an appropriate time to highlight the Welsh Government's success in helping young people into work through its support for apprenticeships and the Jobs Growth Wales programme. It's also appropriate to highlight the marvellous work that's been done in Flintshire by both Airbus and Coleg Cambria. And they are getting young people into apprenticeships, young people, both male and female. However, a British Gas survey has learnt that poor careers advice was resulting in girls limiting their career choices, ruling out apprenticeships as a viable career path for them. So looking to the future, how will a Welsh Labour government build on its successes to encourage more young women into taking up apprenticeships?
Well, the member raises a hugely important issue because equality is a key theme of our work on apprenticeships. It's why we commissioned Estyn to carry out a thematic review on barriers to apprenticeships in 2014. But she does mention, of course, good examples not in her constituency, but not very far away, in Airbus, where the Airbus Industrial Cadets programme at Broughton has 2 all-girl cohorts. They've given over 140 year 9 and 10 students the opportunity to take part in an industrial engineering project, and that of course helps to ensure that young girls of that age get the opportunity to see what the job entails, and they will of course then use that experience to make decisions in the future for themselves. Hugely important that careers are seen as open to both sexes, we understand that, and it's through schemes like the Industrial Cadet Scheme, and there are others such as the Ford Saturday Club at Bridgend that ensure that what has historically been a weakness, in other words, young women going into engineering, is addressed through practical experience.
Janet Saunders.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. First Minister, over the past 10 years, under your government, Wales has fallen 14 places against other nations in standards of science, fallen behind 9 places in maths and fallen behind 11 places in reading. More than 30% of 15 to 16-year-olds have not reached the levels of literacy and numeracy that does allow them to communicate and operate effectively in the workplace. That's according to Estin's own figures. One could say that your programme for government has certainly failed over the past 5 years. This, of course, then leads to disengagement with the education system of young people. A Welsh Conservative government would see the introduction of... I don't know why you're looking puzzled. These figures are... Yeah.
I don't know how people are looking.
A Welsh Conservative government
come to the question. Don't just read what...
of university technical colleges that would foster apprenticeships that lead to high-quality, sustainable jobs. Will you support our policy?
Yes or no? Yes or no?
The member will have to forgive my scepticism because he represents a party that got rid of the Future Jobs Fund and removed one of the most important schemes for assisting young people into work that existed, which is why, of course, we introduced Jobs Growth Wales, the most successful scheme for creating opportunities for young people, I would argue, in Europe. It's why we'll build on that to ensure there are opportunities available for all ages. What she doesn't explain, of course, is that her leader, amongst his many troubles on Saturday, including being ignored by David Cameron, said that he would only protect one budget. He would not protect the budget for apprenticeships. Now, on that basis, what the member is suggesting is that there will be a new scheme in place, but with no money. We will make sure that what we are planning to do, that there are opportunities available for all, and given the track record of the Conservatives with their cutting of the Future Jobs Fund, the cutting of support for those who want education, the cutting of the education maintenance allowance, ensuring that students have to pay far more in England, the answer to her question is no, we don't agree because their track record is appalling.
I'm being very generous today, Darren Miller. Don't tempt me. Rhys Iorwerth.
Diolch, mi oedd hi'n braf iawn cyfarfod Dafydd Jones yr wythnos diwetha sy'n newydd ddechrau'r brentisiaeth fel ffitter efo orthios yn yr Parc Eco yng Nghaergybi. Mae o'n edrych ymlaen at gael y datblygu yrfa fel peiriannydd yn Ynys Môn. Wrth gwrs, mae'n bwysig iawn bod cwmnïau yn cael eu tynnu mewn i raglenni prentisiaethau, bod na ddigon o brentisiaethau ar gael. Ond mae hefyd yr un mor bwysig, wrth gwrs, bod pobl ifanc yn dod yn ymwybodol o'r cyfleon sy'n ar gael iddyn nhw drwy brentisiaethau. A wneith y Prif Weinidog felly gydnabod y niwed sy'n yn cael ei wneud i annog prentisiaethau, i gychwyn pobl ifanc ar lwybrau tuag at brentisiaethau drwy gytogi ar gyllideb gyrfa Cymru o dros hanner yn oes y llywodraeth yma. Oni bai bod y cyngor iawn ar gael yn y lle iawn, dydy pobl ifanc ddim yn mynd i fod yn ymwybodol o'r llwybrau sy'n ar agor iddyn nhw.
Wel, does ddim brynder o gwbl o bobl ifanc sydd eisiau cael prentisiaeth. Ni wedi gweld yn Airbus, ni'n gweld mewn sawl rhan arall o Gymru. Does ddim broblem gyda bobl yn gwneud cais i gael prentisiaeth. Ac wrth gwrs, os ydych ni ar gynllun fel Jobs Growth Wales, maen nhw wedi bod yn llwyddiannus dros ben. 80% o bobl ifanc wedi cael y cyfle i fy mlaen i addysg bellach neu i swydd. A mae hwnna'n dangos, wrth gwrs, bod beth ni wedi bod yn neud fel Llywodraeth wedi bod yn llwyddiannus dros ben. A'n bwriad ni, wrth gwrs, sicrhau bod hwn yn cael ei ymestyn ar ôl mis Mai i rhywna o bob oedran.
Question 5, Elena Parrott.
Diolch, Llywydd. Will the First Minister make a statement on the availability of school places in Cardiff?
Well, that would be a matter, of course, for the Cardiff LEA.
Well, thank you for that answer, First Minister, such as it was. I must declare an interest, Llywydd, in that my own son is affected in this situation. You'll no doubt be aware, First Minister, of the chaos in Cardiff with the allocation of secondary school places. A number of schools across the city are affected, but the east of the city very particularly so. And 2 weeks after places were supposed to be confirmed, many of my constituents' children still don't have a place in any secondary school, and those parents are understandably incredibly anxious. First Minister, will you commit to investigate what has gone wrong in Cardiff this year with the allocation of secondary school places, and will you be prepared to step in if the local authority still fails to resolve the situation?
Well, the local authority are obliged to provide places for children. They have to do that fairly. There have to be criteria in place that are transparent in order for people to understand that admission arrangements are being properly implemented. I have to say to the member that I know one of the issues it surrounds Cardiff High School, and people, as I understand from, and this is a matter that's been raised with me by Jenny Rathbone as the member for Cardiff Central, pupils going from Pentwyn to Llanishen not being able to go to Cardiff High, but that was as a result of a change, I understand, to the catchment area that was made by her party on the 1st of September 2011. So that clearly hasn't helped parents in that part of Cardiff.
Jenny Rathbone.
The change that was made by the Liberal Democrat administration in 2011, which seems to be causing this chaos, was not fair for, particularly for the residents of Pentwyn, who have to walk past Cardiff High School to get to Clonition High School. And the member is ill-informed when she doesn't seem to understand if people don't get their first choice, if they don't put a second choice, it's impossible for the council then to allocate them a place. Could the First Minister agree with me that what we need is a really transparent system that everybody understands and that is fair to all citizens and is not gerrymandering the system in favour of some?
Well, there's been changes to admission arrangements, such as changes in catchment areas, must be consulted on in accordance with the School Admissions Code. It sets out a very strong expectation that parents will be involved in consultation. And it's hugely important that parents understand what the reasoning is when catchment areas are drawn up. On top of that, of course, when it comes to admissions, the Council are required to ensure the admission arrangements are transparent and properly implemented, and that the oversubscription criteria are applied fairly.
Andrew Archie-Davis.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. First Minister, one of the things that causes a great deal of concern to parents when trying to seek access to schools are the development plans that councils put forward and obviously submitted to Welsh Government for approval. Do you believe that the planning advice that is given to cater for new housing development, especially in Cardiff, where large housing developments are proposed around the edges of Cardiff, are robust enough in the tests that they set for the provision of schooling, but also other public services that need to be put in to cater for those communities? Because this bottleneck is not going to go away anytime soon, and the number of school places in Cardiff is under huge pressure.
Well, overall in Cardiff, of course, there are other schools where there are surpluses. But of course, inevitably, there are some schools that will be seen as more popular than others. Local authorities do have the ability, through Section 106 agreements, to make sure that education provision is made when new housing estates particularly are built. And there are examples across Wales where that's happened, where new primary schools have been built particularly, and they must take that into account and obtain a Section 106 agreement in order to make sure that education provision is adequate when a new housing estate is built. They have the machinery to do it. It's hugely important, of course, that they use that machinery.
Question 6, Aled Robert.
Llywydd. Beth mae Llywodraeth Cymru yn wneud i annog grwpiau cymunedol i gymryd rhan yn y broses o restru adeiladau o arwyddocâd hanesyddol a lleol?
Wel, ni'n erbyn i fil yr ymgylchedd hanesyddol gael cydsyniad brenhinol ar yr unfed ar hugen o Fawrth. Bydd y ddeddf, wrth gwrs, yn galluogi i adeiladau hanesyddol gael i diogelu yn well. Ni yn drafftio canllawiau ar lunio a rheoli restrau o asedau hanesyddol sydd o ddiddordeb lleol arbennig, a'r angen i annog diddordeb a chyfranogaeth cymunedol o'r dechrau.
Dwi'n siŵr bod chi'n ymwybodol o sefyllfa Ysgol y Llwyni yn Wrexham, y Groves, lle mae y cyngor wrth roi rhybydd o 4 diwrnod wedi deud bod nhw eisiau dymchwel yr adeilad, a hynny'n groes i gobeithio'n y bobl leol, mwyafrif y bobl leol. Wrth dderbyn bod chi yn drafftio canllawiau eich hun ar hyn o bryd, A wnewch chi'n glir I gyngor Wrecsam bod na ddim gofyn ar yn nhw I ddymchwil yr adeilad tra bod nhw'n cynnig am grant ysgolion yr 11 ganrif ar 20 o achos dyna yr esboniad maen nhw'n rhoi ar hyn o bryd, bod gynnu nhw ddim yr arian I ail-wneud yr adeiladu presennol a bod nhw eisiau dymchlo mwyn creu ysgol newydd yn rhatach. Newch chi felly wneud o'n glir I gyngor Wrecsam bod na ddim disgwyl I nhw fynd a rhithro I ddymchwil yr adeilad hanesyddol yma.
Wel, does dim rhaid yn wneud e. Yn un wir, a fi wedi bod, wedi sefyll tu fas i'r ysgol gyda Leslie Griffiths fel aelod Wrecsam. Mi'n gwybod bod hwn yn rhywbeth sydd yn bwysig iawn yn yr ardal a bobl yn anhapus gyda phenderfyniad Wrecsam I dynnu'r adeilad lawr. Ond, beth sy'n bwysig yw bod y cyngor yn sylweddoli bod dim rhaid wneud hwn. Mater I nhw yw hwn. Dyw ddim yn rhywbeth dylen nhw I drial... Dyn nhw ddim trial roi y bai ar rwy'n arall, achos mae hwn yn rhywbeth sydd maen nhw eisiau wneud. A mae lan I nhw, wrth gwrs, I sicrhau bod yn esbonio hwnna i'r bobl lleol a nid ceisio roi'r bai ar unrhyw gorff arall.
Mike Hedges.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. We know that almost every one of the large 19th century buildings is listed in some form. Many, unfortunately, are derelict or abandoned. I can think of 3 in my own constituency, one which only has got 2 walls, which is still listed. Could we agree that we need to get communities decide which of these buildings are the most important, and to try and then to get the money and the investment needed to preserve these buildings? Because I have serious concerns that some very important buildings are coming, and as the First Minister knows, I've got a great interest in chapels of the 19th century, and many of these are having collapsing congregations and in danger of becoming empty in the near future. And it's important that we actually try and work out what we can preserve and then get the investment to preserve them.
Yes, the member, of course, represents a constituency that includes the non-conformist cathedral of the Morriston Tabernacle. But coming back to what I said earlier on, the Act itself is there, and what we see as a result of the Act is guidance that will be created. That will mean that there will be management of lists of historic assets, and, of course, communities will need to be engaged from the outset. Communities know best which buildings they wish to preserve that are of particular value to them, and having, of course, that list of historic assets would be useful for communities to understand what assets they have, and then, of course, to move forward with looking to utilise or preserve those assets in the future.
And finally, Susie Davis.
Diolch, Llywydd. First Minister, I'm sure you'll join me in welcoming the Friends of Aberdillais Tinworks and Waterfall who are visiting the Assembly from my region today. They offer a great deal of support to staff, and it's a particularly famous National Trust site which helps them be local voices to promote tourism in the Vale of Neath and nearby areas. The scoping work of the Heritage Bill considered the role of volunteers and community groups in taking on, where appropriate, responsibility for local heritage assets. And while this wasn't actually reflected in the Historic Environment Bill, what evidence did the government glean during that process which would help local community organisations, perhaps like the Friends, be at the forefront of shaping these local lists?
Well, I was there 2 months ago, as I'm sure that they were aware. It was my first visit, and it was hugely impressive. It's a site I've driven past many times, but not visited, and went there, I think, in the second week of January. Coming back to what I said before, community involvement in managing lists of historic assets is hugely important. And as I've said now on 2 previous occasions, it's hugely important that people are engaged as soon as possible in terms of drawing up those lists and in terms of being able to manage those assets in the future.
Thank you, First Minister. We now move to item 2.